This astaxanthin supplement, I hear it's 6,000 times stronger than vitamin C, 100 times stronger than vitamin E, and 800 times stronger than CoQ10?
Yes, astaxanthin supports joint health, memory health, even anti-aging and immune health. This Hawaii brand delivers 3 times more nature-identical astaxanthin to your body and is a better buy than the competition. It's called Xanthicin. Safely manage your inflammatory health with Xanthicin. It's pure and highly absorbed, providing greater benefits. Visit getxantho.com and these retailers.
All right, how's it going, everybody? Another edition of Hawaii Football Now. For those that have been following along with us over the last few months, we usually release this thing on Thursday. And if anybody was waiting, I don't know how many people were actually waiting on pins and needles for this thing to drop, but you noticed we didn't have an episode yesterday. We record this on Friday instead. Full disclosure, we had a full episode taped as we are back with you, Jordan Helly and Hunter Hughes, on another edition of Hawaii Football Now, presented by Xanthicin. Big mahalo to our other sponsor, Spectrum Mobile, as well. So we had a full recording recapping the Wyoming win. We usually record on Tuesdays, Hunter and I. So we had that all in the queue, ready to go on Thursday. And then all kinds of things happened over the next 48 hours. Less than an hour, I think, after we finished recording on Tuesday. News of Dede Hunter hitting the transfer portal came down, starting running back for the University of Hawaii. Wednesday, the big bombshell, Chevan Cordero, the starting quarterback for the University of Hawaii, he announced that he was entering the transfer portal and leaving the program. That seemed to trigger later Wednesday an impromptu Twitter space. I had no idea what a Twitter space was. I had never joined one before, but it became this big sort of event. It was started by alums Darryl McBride Jr., RJ Hollis had a pivotal role in it as well. That thing grew to like 400 people at its peak, just listening in. And it had what started originally as just a space for several alums to get together and talk about basically the state of the program, kind of organically turned into this large discussion between alums, some players that had played on this season's team. Basically, I think everybody who spoke is either an alum or somebody who is departing the program, either due to eligibility or by choice, to retire or transfer. There were even some fans who spoke at that. And so that became a huge topic of conversation. It had a slew of very prominent folks listening in. I think folks that work for the university. You had guys as high profile as like Pisa Tinoi Samoa listening in, right? As high profile a player to ever come through this program. So it was really interesting. I tuned in for a very short period of time. I didn't really catch everything. So you got all of that swirling around, and that's just like the 24 hours after we recorded on Tuesday. And then word comes down Thursday that there is an additional bowl game being added to the schedule. Hawaii at 6-7 is likely going to be included in the bowl eligible teams, likely the Hawaii Bowl. It was later confirmed that indeed Hawaii will be playing Christmas Eve 3 weeks from today at Ching against Memphis. And so all of this has gone down in the last 3 days, Hunter, and it has been a crazy whirlwind to think that we are not even a week removed from Hawaii's best game of the season, the best game arguably of the Todd Graham era against Wyoming, where they go up to Laramie, win for the first time since 1991 in dominant fashion on both sides of the football, 38-14 over the Cowboys. And so we kind of had to scrap the episode that we had recorded, and now we rejoin you trying to digest everything that has gone on. First question, did I miss anything, Hunter?
I don't think so. Other than just, it's even catching national spotlight. It's not just a big deal locally, but even as we record this at 9:16 on Friday morning, some articles and literature has been produced by the Mountain West Wire, citing there's trouble in paradise. That was literally the title of the post. And it's a mainland beat writer for the Mountain West, kind of describing everything that you just described. It is, I mentioned it to you earlier, Jordan. I was a little worried what we might talk about as the season was winding down in the off season. There's plenty to talk about now, my friend.
Yeah, there really is, right? For all kinds of reasons, some good, such as the bowl berth, the fourth straight year, Hawaii will go to a
Yeah,
bowl game. Some not so good because they're starting quarterback because he's in the portal, and they're starting running back because he is in the portal. And they're not going to play in that bowl game, right? So this is a weird transitional time where you really are looking at the future, even though it's the end of this season. And with all the awkwardness and with all of this sort of coming to light as this conversation becomes more and more public, surrounding the discontent, if you will, around the program, some of the rumblings. Um, the season's not over yet, and that's
right.
the craziest part about all of this. And so, we can get into it, right? Some have thrown around the analogy, and I think it's a really good one. Rich Miano being one of them. There seems to be smoke, right? There seems to be something smoldering, whatever it is. And I think
Yes,
the big question is there a fire, right? Is there something deeper to it, or is it kind of what you would expect from any program, especially a program that struggled throughout the year? You're going to have some unhappy guys. You're going to have some transfers. Like, that is not unique to the University of Hawaii.
that's
So
right.
we'll try and navigate our way through all of that. But I think, Hunter, it's fair to start with what I would say is the biggest of those stories that we sort of recapped, and truly the thing that stirred the largest reaction from everybody, fans, alums, players,
It's Shevin.
media. Shevin transferring, right? Like there's
Absolutely.
no way to tiptoe around that. And so, as we kind of get into parsing that a bit, just how on paper, like how big a loss is that for this program? He's a guy who, 4 years in this program, 2 years as a full-time starter. He had that freshman
Right.
year as well as the free COVID year. So it's kind of a weird equation, but just that they're losing one of the more dynamic quarterbacks in this conference.
Absolutely. And I gotta cite him. I was talking with Mark Veneri earlier this morning, a good friend of mine, a friend of the show. Um, he equates the recruiting of Chevin Cordero right up there, at least locally, with Timmy Chang in terms of what he's meant to our program, the timing of getting him into our program, in light of his predecessor at St. Louis being Tua Tagovailoa. And whenever he first started at University of Hawaii, Tua was competing for a Heisman at Alabama. So we had that pedigree on our team. Kept that kid a great local talent here. He had options to go to the mainland. He stayed, came in for relief for previous players, like Cole McDonald, won games for us. It was a big part of bringing Run and Shoot back to University of Hawaii, reestablishing that Pride Rock marketing mantra that Rolo coined. Chevin was a big part of that. And so, Coach Graham even mentioned it last night on Call the Coach. Just, this is a devastating blow for our coaches, for our team, for the University of Hawaii, the community. We love this kid. He's a great guy. He's humble by nature, slow to speak, quick to listen. He garners the respect of players and opponents. I mean, I even heard Coach Rich Miano talking about it today on the Bobby Curran show. The Mountain West defensive coordinators fear number 12 for his dual threat capability and the versatility that you have to prepare for as a defense playing against University of Hawaii because of what Chevin brings to the table. It's huge, Jordan. I thought this might be a good time too to just kind of educate our listeners out there on what the transfer portal actually is. So, because there's been some questions come up, and granted, it's still kind of a clouded subject. So, transfer portal does not mean that they have just said that they're going to another school. It's not quite like National Signing Day where there's a verbal commitment and then there's a written commitment. With transfer portal, you have had a meeting with your coach. You have let them know that, hey, I'm no longer going to be playing for University of Hawaii. And then there's actually paperwork that's officially signed both from the player and as the coach, signing you away from the University of Hawaii football program. And once that happens, you are no longer on the University of Hawaii football roster. So that kind of brings back what you were saying about him and Day Hunter. They are not eligible for if and when we do play this bowl game on Christmas Eve. Those guys will not be on our team. So kind of a bummer there. And then, yeah, just in light of everything else going on in the college football world, Jordan, Hawaii seemed to feel left out of all of the chaos that was Lincoln Riley and Coach Kelly from Notre Dame. They're like, hey, Hawaii's got a circus of our own. Let's see what we got here.
Right, and so that and I appreciate that, Hunter. I appreciate you explaining that the transfer portal a little bit too, right? Because it's still pretty new.
It is
in the grand scheme of things. It is still a little confusing, and as you point out, a little cloudy. But yeah, I believe the words that Coach Graham used last night was heartbroken, right, over the departure of Chevan Cordero. And so you bring up the drama, the circus nature of, say, Lincoln Riley going to USC from Oklahoma, and the fact that it sounds like he's bringing a fair amount of guys from that Oklahoma roster over to Los Angeles. The circus that was Brian Kelly leaving for LSU, even though Notre Dame could very well be in the playoff after this weekend, 100%. And just all that comes with it. So I bring that up, or I elaborate on that point to ask, why is this different? I think is a fair question, right? Why is Chevan Cordero, a Day Hunter, leaving the University of Hawaii? And you touched on some of the reasons I think why it is different, but why is it different than, say, those guys leaving, or Jay Kaner leaving Fresno State, who, by the way, is going to follow his head coach, DeBoer, up to the University of Washington, or an Adrian Martinez, right, a 4-year guy at Nebraska leaving to go find a new home, or Dylan Gabriel, right, local boy who's leaving UCF after all that success, or really any number of FBS quarterbacks or high-profile players that enter the transfer portal every year. Like, why is this different?
Yeah, I think on the mainland, when you are in the Power Five, you're constantly competing with other schools. That's when facilities, program, style, tradition, location, fan experience, that is always at play here. You have these schools spending tens of millions of dollars every year, literally at competition with each other. I think that just kind of goes hand in hand. What is different about Hawaii? It's kind of this unique. It's a Division I environment, but it's a small community driven school. You have to care about what the community sees and appreciates from your program, because that's the only way you're going to keep talent here. It's a much different situation than some of the bigger schools on the mainland. The only thing that I can kind of think to is during those 30 for 30 documentaries, they did it on the University of Miami, the U, and Schnellenberger back in the 80s, really owning the state of Florida. We are going to own Florida. We're not letting any top tier talent leave Florida. They need to be coming to the U. And because of that, they won multiple national championships because of that mentality. And so I think about that. They had a local mentality there. And similarly, if you're going to play well in Hawaii, you have to keep that talent here. And because it's such a small place and word travels so fast, and we know these guys because of high school football being such a big deal out here, having a quarterback talent like Chevan, and the success that he's had at our program, he's no slouch of a quarterback. He's a great player. To see it happen to us, yes, the transfer portal is just part of the heartbeat of college football these days. But it feels like there's more going on here. And, I appreciate what Coach Miano brought up again today. I cite him again because I really agree with what he said. People can instantly blame guys like Coach Bo Graham or Todd Graham with the way that they're running this program. And it's not us. It's not Hawaii. Get these Howley guys out of here. There is a lot that both these coaches and these players have had to go through in these last 2 years with with COVID-19, with the different protocols put in forth by the highest powers that be, our local government of David Ige and the powers that be, that made it very difficult to enjoy playing football at the Division I level here in Hawaii. From limited fan experiences to even family and friends not able to attend practices, stuff that former players really deem what makes playing football at Hawaii so special. It wasn't the case there. And that had nothing to do with Coach Graham and his staff, nothing to do. In a lot of ways, for them to put a competitive team together in light of all of those restrictions, I got to tip my cap to them. They did a fantastic job. So I think, moving forward with the closure of Aloha Stadium and everything happening now on campus, it does seem what you were saying, like there could be some smoke coming from the camp of University of Hawaii, because we got to figure some stuff out now. Because if we are on campus and we are trying to compete recruiting wise with the other schools in the Mountain West, we have to consider, okay, is there something going on internally, the way that we are preparing our teams, structuring our programs, that are allowing these guys to transfer? We can't afford that to happen, especially when attendance is limited and everything that we are going through. I think it's just, if you're a leader, you have to look at things candidly and honestly. And if the blame does fall to you in some category, I feel like you have to be man enough to admit if it does fall there.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point, right? Because, to keep using that analogy, like the powers that be, from everybody within that program, from the head coach up to the athletic director, up to the president of the university, right?
Right.
It's trying to sift through, like, all of those things are fair and true, right? The lack of institutional support, the lack of institutional funding, the lack of, a legitimate Division I stadium, even though I think there's a lot of potential for that facility on campus, like all of those things, COVID, the restrictions, nobody in attendance, no food or drink, even once people got to come back. Like, those are things that really were out of the head coach's control, but it is also a reality, right? And so it takes a very specific kind of individual, and I think a very understanding individual, to come into that position as head football coach and navigate all of that, right? Because we talk about Hawaii being unique, and it takes a unique person to helm the ship, if you will. And I think that comes off as a little pompous sometimes, like, oh, well, we're more special. But really, it's kind of a reality, an introspective kind of look. Is like, it's special, yes, but not always in the most positive of ways. And so it takes somebody who really understands kind of the fabric, good and bad, of what makes up not just the culture of Hawaii, but the how to untangle, the red tape and all of those kinds of things as you go through it. And so, to kind of circle back to your point about Shevin, which I think is a very, very astute one, right? He is a guy, and Christian Shimabuku, I thought, had a great tweet. He's from KHON. Shevin Cordero was the light at the end of the tunnel, right, for a struggling Hawaii football program when he signed in 2017, and has largely lived up to those expectations, right? You're coming out of some pretty bleak years of the Norm Chow era, and to have a local kid sign, to have a local quarterback sign from St. Louis school with that pedigree, and to have him turn into a very bona fide starter is a big deal, right? And you point out, he's the kid who stayed home from storied St. Louis school. The other thing about that is, like, he's got name, image, likeness deals here locally. Right. He's got a deal with CPB, Central Pacific Bank. Like, I can't imagine that's going to go with him to the mainland, right? So he's turning down money, quite honestly, money to leave. And so that in itself is also a red flag, right? That in itself is a lot to walk away from it. And maybe there are greener pastures. Maybe there are bigger opportunities to see if he ends up at, say, a Power 5 school or something like that. Yeah. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but maybe. And then the St. Louis connection, as you point out, like the next guy, if you will, is supposed to be AJ Bianco, another St. Louis product. And that is a tight brotherhood with very real connections, familial connections. And I mean, I think we'd all be kind of naive to think that conversations won't take place, whether directly or indirectly. As you point out, it's Hawaii. It's a tight-knit community. Word travels fast. Like, you got to imagine, right? He's going to at least ask, like, hey, Shevin, how come you're leaving?
100%.
Right. And so, like, Bianco hasn't signed on the dotted paper, as you point out. There's a very real difference between a verbal commitment and an actual signature on a letter of intent. And so this has bigger ramifications and everything that goes with it. And that's why I think it is very different than Jake Haener leaving Fresno State, or Adrian Martinez leaving, or even Drew Brown, who left, a few years ago to go to Oklahoma State. Like, I think it's much different than that for so many reasons that have nothing to do with him just on the field. Like, it's all the off the field reasons. And so I guess that's the bigger picture question, right? Is what is this a signal of? What really is the root of all of this? Is it just simply, guys leaving like every other program? Is it a sign of something massively wrong with the program? My guess is it's probably someplace in between, right? You got Rolo recruits leaving, you've got Todd Graham recruits leaving. So there's a little bit of both, right? There've been a number of guys who have announced they're entering the portal, guys like Kilohana Hassan-Ritter, Donovan Dalton, who's a Graham recruit. Yep. Hassan-Ritter came in under Rolo, the guys retiring in the case of Kai Kaneshiro. And so, that is the bigger question, I think. And so as we kind of near the midway point of this podcast, I think it's a good time to take a little bit of a break, and then we can kind of get into that bigger picture question, right? Like what is at the root of all of this? Is there something more tangible there? We can get into some of the much more public comments now by some of these current or recently ex-players, if you will. Yeah. So we'll go ahead, take a quick break, come back, get you into the second half of all of this stuff. But of course, we got to remind you about our great sponsor before we get on out of here. Astaxanthin, of course, good for joint muscle function, better cholesterol, cognitive function, including anti-aging qualities. Astaxanthin, made by our good friends over at Xanthicin, delivers 3 times more astaxanthin than the competition. You can get that available at getxantho.com, Newtown Square Pharmacy, Down to Earth in Kaka'ako, Pharmacare, Hawaii. And again, check out getxantho.com, getxantho.com to order, learn anything you need, all the information there. We'll be back, second half coming up. You're listening to Hawaii Football Now.
This is Hawaii Football Now from ESPN Honolulu.
All right, second half time. We'll get into a little bit of a bigger picture question, right? Because we point out, right? What is this a signal of? Shevin Cordero, Dede Hunter, I think the big part of that. You've got to also consider it with the fact that there are now very public signs of palpable discontent,
unrest
within the locker room, right? Unrest, as evidenced by players like Dede Hunter, Kai Kaneshiro, Zacchaeus McKinney, Aaron Cephas. I know were some that spoke in that Twitter space that was hosted on Wednesday. Again, I didn't really hear all of it, but hearing from Darryl McBride, who has spoken out, we had him, Kanoa Leahy and I did on our podcast, which we aired yesterday. Let's Talk Sports, which you can catch on all the platforms as well. There just seems to be a general sense that a number of players were unhappy. There were disconnections within the team, guys saying basically that they weren't having fun, and that isn't necessarily the be all end all, right? This is Division I college football.
That's right.
And at the end of the day, this team goes 6-7 in Todd Graham's 2 years. He's 500, right?
That's right.
5-4 last year, 6-7 this year, with everything going on and swirling. Like, that ain't bad.
It's actually better. It's better than the Rolo era when they started.
It actually is. Yeah, and it's pretty on par with the Greg McMackin start as well. If you want to kind of look at a comparison of a coach taking over for a program that won a conference championship as he did once June Jones left. So it's not like the results on the field have been terrible. Now, you can argue, right, expectations this year, especially with what we saw from the offense late in the season, what we saw from the offense individually, talent-wise, like it underachieved. I don't think it's unfair to say that. But at the end of the day, 2 straight bowl games. They're backing in. I get it. But it's better than a lot of 2-year stretches in the history of Hawaii football, right? In the decades of Hawaii football. And so with all of that being considered, right, the smoke is certainly there. What we don't know is how big the fire is, if there is a fire, because again, it can't all be broken. They had 88 points in their last 2 games, including a win in Laramie for the first time in 1991. A performance where they looked terrific on both sides of the football. And so how much, I guess, Hunter, you bring the player's perspective first and foremost. And so how much should we read into some of these comments that have been coming out?
I think it's important. I think it's, it's an interesting landscape right now with college football, both with name, image, and likeness going on, the transfer portal. Some real power has shifted now from athletic departments to coaches. Now it's kind of in the players' hands, and that brings up a whole new slew of controversy and opinions. Should college football players even get paid? They're young people, they're amateurs. All of that was put in place for their protection. Okay, yeah, I get all of that. Well, some people were listening at NCAA, and one thing has led to another in the last few years, and this is the current climate that we are in right now. And so we are watching that at play, and because of that, I think players' opinions, especially big-time players like Shevin, who speak both as a leader of our team, an elected captain of our team, but then a local boy as well. Like, we have to listen to what they have to say. We have to. Gone are the days of just dismissing them as, oh yeah, they're just a young college student, without a fully developed prefrontal cortex. No, like, what they have to say and their experiences, they matter now. They absolutely do. And I want to bring this up just from a player's perspective. Take away Coach Graham's style of coaching, the heavy emphasis on faith, put all that aside, because the day-to-day practices and game-like environments, the way that he conducts stuff is completely contrary to how Roller went about stuff. I think anybody can see that. From a player's perspective, some of the stuff that I know that they're having to try to come up with answers for their folks, for their friends, watching the team, being connected to the environment, are some of the nepotism stuff. So if I'm showing up on my team to practice into games, and okay, yeah, I get this guy's from the South, he likes a family environment, he hires his son. Hey, if his son is doing a great job, I'm for it. But then when things started to happen this season, and you touched on it, our offense was more than capable of scoring points. We showed it in the later part of the year. And just going back to a place of humility and, hey, where does the blame actually fall here? Because I'm for this. I'm speaking from the perspective of a player. I'm for this. I've shown you that I'm for this from my commitment to the program, through adversity, all of this COVID stuff, through thick and high water. I am here. I'm a University of Hawaii football player. But then you start going into some more of this nitty gritty stuff. And that's what makes this situation a really interesting one. You've got a coach's son that is now a coach. You've got another coach's son that is on the roster on defense. And from little things that I've heard, is potentially getting preferential treatment, traveling with the team when he's not a starter, barely getting time, not getting other guys that potentially could be in there as well. That's taking up a spot on the plane for another coach's son. You've got a next door neighbor who is on the depth chart of the quarterbacks. And you've got some interesting things happening right here where from a player's perspective, hey, if he can play, he can play. If he brings value to the team, I'm glad he's there. And I'm not saying those guys aren't doing that. I'm just trying to paint a picture of one of potentially many of the things that these players might be going through day in, day out with this program, because it's more than just winning and losing when you play for University of Hawaii. There's more stuff you have to consider, what's going on in the community, how these players are involved, because it is such a small, intimate environment. That's what I'd say about that, Jordan.
Yeah, and so you've heard from some of these guys speaking out, the general unhappiness, you know, from even some guys on the defensive side of the football, where
Yes.
you know that was the unit that really shined through all season long. And so, as you point out, right, that if you can handle your business, if you can get the job done, whether you're player, coach, whatever, football's a meritocracy in a lot of ways, right?
You could
So
be
it's
from
like,
Mars. We
right, if
don't
you
care.
can play, you can play, no
That's
matter
right.
no matter how you got there, as long as you get the job done. And so, with all of those things kind of considered, Hunter, you know, what should be taking place in a healthy locker room? Because you heard some things about some disconnect between different sides of the football, guys not really knowing each other deep into the season. And I got to imagine some of the COVID protocols play into that, right? You're kept separate for reasons, logistical reasons, even, right? You've got your group that you lift with, you got your group that you're going to training with, and all those kinds of things exist
Position
just
groups,
in normal day to day. But you know what healthy locker rooms that you've been a part of in the past, like what do those look like?
Yeah, I mean, it was such a stark controversy from the Chow era, where it was a very militant environment. 10 minutes before practice, you were late. You showed up, yes sir, no sir. You looked on the chart, found your assignment, and did everything but salute to that guy. You, in a lot of ways, again, like I'm speaking as a walk-on, you were not a person. You weren't all that much valued as a player. You were a cog in the wheel, but at the same time, you understood your assignments and you were a part of the team. And I wanted to be a part of that, but I'm just letting people know what that's kind of like. In contrast, when Rolo comes in, and everyone who's played or been around him calls him a player's coach. Very, very high on relationship, very high on personality, incorporating that into the way that you play. You're seen, you're heard. I mean, I'm a perfect example of that. I didn't play one down officially for the University of Hawaii, but for whatever reason, they deemed my value on the team something merited and gave me a full ride scholarship my senior year. So I think, you know, at least from my perspective, because that's really all I have, in the current climate of college football, you have to consider what a player's experience is like, or they're going to leave. This old school, my way or the highway environment that I experienced in the Norm Chow era, the taking away of the haka at times, some traditional things, outlawing of certain music in the locker rooms, making sure everyone had a high and tight haircut. I mean, I'm just saying what happened in the Chow environment. It's very, very difficult to win games and inspire the imagination of young people to want to run through a brick wall for you when that sort of stuff is being painted. Now, if we're winning games, if we're going 11-0, absolutely. Where is the line? I'm standing at attention. But when it's not, when your way ain't working in the my way or the highway model, it's going to be hard to stick around.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens going forward, right? Because that's the next big question is how does this program move forward? How do they choose to address some of these, you know, rumblings, the departures as well, and the thing that gets this all so much more complicated is the season's not done yet.
I know.
Like they have 3 more weeks and a bowl game now. Not even 48 hours ago, we didn't think that was happening, right? It seemed like full off-season mode transfers. Guys speaking
We were
out, all this
freaking
kind of
out.
stuff, right?
We
It's
were
like,
freaking out texting each other. It's not done yet.
yeah, and so how do they move forward here as they get ready for this Hawaii Bowl?
Yeah, I think it's similar to bouncing back after the UNLV game, really rallying behind the seniors, focusing on what they can. I mean, that group of seniors, they brought it up, are going to play in their 4th straight bowl game. I mean, that is crazy. There was a time when we went 10 years without a bowl win for University of Hawaii. So the fact that I don't think it's any stretch of the imagination, Jordan. Like, we've established a winning program right here. And so any sort of bump in the road, we don't like, because I don't like us moving anywhere neutral or backwards. I want us moving forward as a program because the foundation has been laid. And I think they've got another great opportunity right here of seeing what could be done. And for this coaching staff, if they win a bowl game, that's 2 straight bowl games for this coaching staff. I think a lot of this unrest or dissatisfaction could be put to bed, because winning heals everything, man. It really does.
Yeah, and who knows how shorthanded the roster is going to be. It's looking like it's Memphis on December 24th, a second straight American team that Hawaii will play in a bowl game. Remember the win over Houston last year, a Houston team that's bound for the Big 12 here shortly. And so we'll see how that all plays out. It's going to be really interesting how they keep everything together, whether some of those guys, guys who thought they were on their way out, maybe not necessarily due to transfer portal, but because their eligibility had run out. Are they hanging around, right? Some of these grad transfers that had come in and played out the season, like a McKinney, like a Cephas. So yeah, it's going to be really telling, I think, how things are held together, because I do give credit the way that they responded against Colorado State and Wyoming. 100%. I thought it didn't seem like it was getting lower than UNLV, and for them to rebound the way that they did, I was fairly impressed. And that doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden everything is forgiven and everything is healed inside, because you've heard some of those things. But it's going to be really, really telling for the future, I think, of this program, how the next 3 weeks play out, how that bowl game goes, and what the roster is looking like. The guys coming in, the guys going out, what signing day looks like as well, because that'll be huge for Coach Graham in this program going forward. And so, Hunter, to kind of close out the conversation, I wanted to ask you this as an alum, because we heard, and again, the Darryl McBride Twitter space was started originally as just for a handful of alums, right? That wanted to talk about this, that cared deeply about this program, that have deep concern for this program when things aren't going well, when things such as the discontent come to the surface.
Yeah. And
again, you got some pretty prominent guys, not just listening, but also speaking. I mean, Adam Leonard spoke, one of the best linebackers to come through this program, late 2000s, right? You had guys like Samson Ongwai speak, you had Darryl, you had RJ speak. There were a lot of guys, and I think the overall takeaway I took from that was just the pride that these guys still have, and I know you have, in this program, and the desire to help, the desire to be a part of solutions, desire to be a part of success going forward. And so from your perspective, and I know you didn't really get to listen into the Twitter space, but just knowing these guys, being part of this alumni network, the brotherhood, if you will, and seeing the response, and almost like a call to action about like the concern for this program. And again, it's a program that's 500 over the last 2 years and going to a second straight bowl game, but it was very palpable to me and very recognizable, just the care and the passion and how much these guys want to see the program to succeed. And so from your perspective, being part of that very exclusive group, if you will, of guys who have put on the jersey, have come through this program, have given a lot to that university. What did you make of the groundswell that kind of organically came up, and just how the alums can be incorporated into, a healthy, viable, winning program going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I would love for this segment more than anything else to be the loudest part of our podcast today. If this ever got back to Coach Graham and the staff, we are in support of this program and the players, and are willing to lend our hands, our stances in the community to help the program any way that we can. Literally, if you had all those guys sitting behind me, they would agree with me that we are not trying to start a trash talking storm and just get this place in a big burning fire. We are still feel like we're a member of the team, feel like we are deeply connected and tied to the program and want to see it succeed just as much as you guys do, that are currently in there. And a lot of, the conversations I had in the last couple of days was really brainstorming with guys. Okay, like, this is what's happening. How do we fix it? How do we be a part of the solution here instead of the ongoing trash talking nature that is typical of social media anywhere in the world, not just here in Hawaii? And so, that was one of the things that I found, regardless of era, regardless of coaching regime, style of offense, style of defense, record, is this universal, okay, our boys are hurting. Our program, as our dear University of Hawaii Rainbow Warriors, are in trouble right now. We're here, we're able. How do we help? Like that is, I know that's what's happening in my heart. And I know, and I can speak for a lot of those guys, specifically Samson Ongwae, who has a huge stance right now in the youth football space locally, and is a very prominent voice there. And so that's a very important and key voice to consider in the raising up of talent here locally. We care deeply about University of Hawaii and want the future to be bright. And so I guess that'd be my way of answering that, Jordan.
No, I really appreciate that. And I think that was the general sense, right? It wasn't necessarily guys coming in and calling for jobs, calling for guys to be fired and anything like that. Like, that really wasn't the sentiment from at least what I heard from a lot of the alums, the vast majority of the alums. It was more like, hey, something's going on, right? And we want to be part of the solution. We want to help. And how that plays out, I don't know. We'll see how it goes forward. But we'll kind of wrap things up here. I know we'll have a lot more to get to next week. With the way this thing is going, everything could change in the next 4 or 5 days before we record again. But Hunter, I really appreciate it. I've really enjoyed these conversations. We try to get into the issues as best as we can, as honestly as we can, and as fair as we can. And this was, at least, kind of from the outside looking in, one of the more eventful, pivotal, perhaps turn point weeks, in Hawaii football history in a long time. And we'll see how things play out. But just my appreciation to you, Hunter. Have a great weekend, man. This was enjoyable. We'll look forward to next week. Thank you, brother. Have a good one. And aloha to everybody else out there as well. Again, you've been listening to Hawaii Football Now, presented by Xanthison, and a big mahalo to our sponsor, Spectrum Mobile, as well. We'll see you next week, everybody. Aloha.
You've been listening to Hawaii Football Now with Jordan Helly and Hunter Hughes, all from ESPN Honolulu.